Hello, viewer, and welcome to Spotlight here on Hope TV, where you look and live. And on Spotlight, we are always doing our very best to bring to you persons who are doing some things right in the direction of light transforming our community. And youth, a very important subject, but we need to check this conversation, especially when it's coming from the mouth of politics. And you ask yourself many times, a lot of talk about young people, and when you look at the situation, you ask yourself, are they victors or are they victims? You know, when you think about the political space, and we want to ask ourselves also, is the concern for young people, though they are talked about a lot, is a concern for young people genuine? Really? Is it authentic? Can we believe these political mouths as they promise and repromise young people? And we are so glad on Spotlight this edition to be joined by Vivienne, who is a commentator and an analyst also of governance. And she's also had her taste in politics. So we want to just welcome you again, Vivienne.
Thank you, Rev.
And viewer, as we engage this conversation, please be part of it by engaging us on this WhatsApp line. That is 0708 222 323, 0708 222 323. On the WhatsApp, please engage us. Let's hear what you have to say about this question of, are youth victors or are they victims? Lillian, welcome back.
Thank you, Rev.
Welcome back to...
the last time we were here, we were having a different conversation.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about you and your ambitions, you know? And at that time, I remember you were an intense aspirant.
Yes.
You know, for Member of Parliament.
Yes, yes.
Of Langata, I remember that.
Yes,
I remember
yes.
that. And you sat there and you were very, you know, you're very intense.
Yes.
And you were very focused and lots of faith, right, about this. But of course now, the reality you're in is quite different. But one constant thing, though, is that you're still interested in matters governance.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And Rev, the faith is still there. Aijadidimia.
Okay.
And also, of course, I receive a lot of love and greetings from Langata people. Yes.
Okay, you're still a leader.
Of course.
No, just in different platforms, right?
Yes.
Not necessarily in Parliament, but in different platforms.
Yes.
You know, and as we talked about that then, I think it's just right for us in the context of this conversation of youth and politics and their place, their participation in government and development. When you were an aspirant, vying for Member of Parliament, did you feel like youthfulness counted? Did you feel like it was valued by the people?
I think it is. There is a lot of value for youth because young people bring the passion, bring the energy, bring the fire into the whole political process. And for that reason, they are an integral part. But that said, it's like, it doesn't mean that they don't have opinions or that they are not able or they don't have capability or ability to lead. I think it's just that they are not appreciated enough for their contribution to the cause, because they do contribute a lot. Just today, we had we had the prayer rally at Jivanji in town, and I can tell you just by observation.
When you mention a prayer, lots of things ran into our heads. These prayers, you know, I mean, Vivienne, to be sincerely, these prayers, without due respect.
I was there, and they were prayers. There were prayers.
What's the point? What's the underlying point?
that were made? But I don't want to digress. I want to focus on...
I mean, it's a prayer season, clearly, for everyone. You know, whether it's the yellows or the blues.
We are praying for rain. We are praying for everything.
Everything is a prayer season. And I mean, and that has come under a lot of suspicion. You know, we'll not say it's become under dismissal, but lots of suspicion. It's like there's a huge political thing going on here, like a political statement. But at the same time, there is a spiritual dimension that is being invoked here.
Introduced.
But which is the what's the cover of this book? You know.
I think I'd say both. Both apply. Both the political and the spiritual apply. I mean, there's no physical takeover without a spiritual takeover. So I mean, you cannot use one and leave out the other. You need both. So I think the recognition that both are important and both apply is something that we need to be cognizant of.
Okay.
So I think maybe the political class is trying to activate that spiritual maybe element. Yes.
Okay, I mean, so were you praying for rain?
No.
Okay.
We're praying for peace for Kenya. We're praying for justice.
Because it seems like the two parties, the two main
I'm talking
parties
about today's event. I
are
cannot
like,
comment on the others.
Let's see who's got answers by fire. You know?
At the end of the day, we are all God's
It's a
children.
Mount Carmel moment. Let's see. Yeah.
Whose God will answer first?
Exactly.
But yeah, today the main issue was praying, of course, for justice and for peace, because I don't know. I don't want to think or say that one person's God is better than another person's, especially if you're both Christians. God is God for us all. He's the creator of all.
But when you talk about that, it's a bit tricky in politics, because if one party says we have arrived here by prayer,
Yes.
prayer has brought us this far.
Yes.
Now the other party should also say prayers have brought us.
Has brought us this far.
So it's a bit.
Prayer has maintained us. Yes.
So I think it's kind of, we need to keep discussing about that, but that's a discussion also
For
for another day.
yes.
But I think that's a dimension that, because it looks like a battle, for the divine, looking for some divine
I wouldn't say it's a battle for the divine. I'd say it's the realization that life in itself is given to you, is a gift of God. So I think when you realize that, you kind of maybe change your perspective a little bit and give credit where it's due. So you don't go about your things and your rallies and your meetings as though there's no God. Yes. So just being cognizant of that, I think that's where a lot of people in the political class are in right now, regardless of whether you are in the team that formed government or you're in our Azimio team. Yes.
Yeah, but again, God should be a uniting factor. Not an Azimio rally here.
I mean,
a Kenya Kwanza
but
rally here.
Rev, you're a Christian, and you know that even in David and Saul's time, I mean, both were God's chosen at different points. Saul was chosen by God, and then David was chosen by God. But they were both God's choice.
Yeah,
and there was conflict there, even though they both prayed to the same God, right? So it's the same thing. We shouldn't expect that because these people believe in God, their thinking will be unanimous. Human beings have choice and free will to choose, how they will align. But it doesn't mean that it makes God any different. He's still God.
All right.
Yeah.
And of course, that's now how we get into God, the political God, so to speak. But that's another conversation, and we pray, we say amen to your prayers.
Yes.
And we were talking about whether you felt that youth counted. When you were out there and presenting yourself to the people, did you feel like youth was valuable?
I felt valued, and I felt the perspectives of young people are valued, but to an extent, especially in political campaigns. What's valued more is like influence, power, wealth, those kind of things. But it doesn't mean that your perspective cannot be listened to if you do not have these things. So it's valued to a certain extent. Before we kicked off this session, I was telling you about how there are young people in Kenya and across the globe who've made it. We now have Greta Thunberg, the climate activist. In Kenya, we had Tom Mboya, who was at the forefront of the movement, and he was youth, right? So it's possible for youth to be heard.
You can add, this is Black History Month, so You can add Martin Luther King Jr.
Yes, Martin Luther
who
King
was
Jr.
young
as
through
well.
and through, even
Yes.
until his
Yes.
death.
But then there's a certain level of influence that's required, and in our current society, you find in many instances this instance is acquired if you have like through political patronage. So if you have a strong political patron, or if you have wealth, those things give you influence. But it does not mean that even without this, that your voice cannot be heard.
Okay.
Your voice can be heard, and youth are really yearning for inclusion. I told you just at the rally, just by observation, I could tell like 90% of the people who showed up, who are eager to listen, eager to participate, are young people. But it also could be that maybe they're showing up because they feel despondent, like, I have nothing to lose. And it's a dangerous place to place young people, because if they feel like we have nothing to lose, then it's a recipe for trouble.
Yeah.
These are people who are young, energetic, they have ideas. They should be included. And especially in the current economic dispensation where things are so hard, everything seems to be backing people against the wall. It's important to have solutions that allow youth to be economically empowered. So if someone has a family, they can feed their family, they can house them, they can school them. Because if they can't, then we're going to have a growing population of people who feel like this life has nothing. And I think maybe that's why there are so many cases of suicide, because people get to a place where they feel there's no hope. There's no hope for me, and I can't be heard. But I think the political class realizes that it's important to include the youth, not just through rhetoric, but actually include them.
Let's do that, because when you talk about including young people,
Yeah.
not just through the rhetoric,
Yeah.
that raises an important question, because lots of mention of young people everywhere, like political rallies all the time, political voices all the time. Like, a lot is mentioned about young people, especially about jobs, about their place in terms of influence in governance and all that, the numbers, all that is mentioned. But I ask myself, and I ask you now, as a governance expert and an analyst, is this mention of young people, this citation of young people, this mention of young people by politicians and seeming promises, are they authentic?
I'd say it's largely rhetoric. There may be few cases where it's legitimate and they actually want to raise up young people, but those are few and far in between. Because if you really want to empower a young person, get their ideas across, it means you have to put them on the table, not speak for them. A lot of them have great ideas, they have great potential, but if you do not allow them the space to be on the table and speak their truths, then you are denying them, the same chance that you're saying you're giving youth. So I think from where I stand, what I see and what I observe is that there's realization that this is a growing number. Their numbers already give them the strength and the influence that is required. But what works against them is the fact that a lot of young people maybe don't have jobs. Or actually jobs, employment is a big issue for the youth, or just economic opportunities. And you see, the truth is, when you lack economic opportunities, it's difficult to think of anything else. Can you imagine if you're not sure about where your rent is coming from, where your food is coming from? How are you even going to start participating in anything else? Your mind is preoccupied with, how do I stay alive?
Yeah.
So I think that is what is working against the youth, because a lot of them are now preoccupied with, how do I just sustain myself so that I can live to see tomorrow and, try another day.
When you're still at it, when you say that from your observation, the mention of young people in the political space is hardly authentic.
Yes.
It's more political than genuine.
Yes.
Right? Now, if young people know that, if young people actually get to know that this whole thing is rhetoric, I mean, there's no real structured
way of
engaging you. In fact,
True.
you're being managed. Right?
Yeah.
You're being managed. When this huge number of young people know that, how should they respond now?
I think my challenge to young people would be take up your place. Okay, but the other truth is not the entire multitude of young people can take up the space. So within this group of young people, we need to identify who can speak for us, who can represent us, because all 10 million of you cannot be in that space. So identify people amongst you who can be in that space and have potential in that space, who will genuinely represent you, because if they don't, you can replace them, as young people, not because of their political, godfathers or patrons, but because as young people, you put them there. But right now, as things are, young people are more like pawns, pawns on the chessboard. Actually, the pawn is like the smallest piece on the chessboard. But it's needed. There are more on the chessboard. I think the most number of pieces, if you think about it. So young people right now are pawns. It's like they are used to further a certain interest, and then when the who's who is done with you, you are pushed aside, and they move on. That is the majority of young people. That is how it is.
And I just want to mirror what you've talked about with movements such as the Arab Spring, for instance.
Yeah.
Which, in terms of influence, young people did not have economic power, really.
Yeah.
In fact, it's the very lack of economic power that led to, or that fueled the Arab Spring.
Yes.
And now here we are, we have huge numbers in our country. Yes, we don't have that kind of economic influence, but we have maybe the statistical power, right, in terms of young people.
The statistical power, and also just the way young people communicate. It's just different from how the rest of the population communicates. For young people, messages, communication can be passed so fast. And before you know it, you can have like a whole group of people there who you're wondering, if you don't handle this right now, the situation can get very chaotic very fast.
Yeah, we're not even talking in terms of political uprising.
Yeah.
We'll talk about self-movement or
Yes.
self-development.
Yes.
When young people realize that they have to stand up for themselves, as you say, they realize, hey, by the way, these people are just talkers, but we can rely on them anymore. In terms of a movement that is based on that, because there's a lot going on, as you say, for young people, how would that movement look like? The one that says, now we are on our own, but we are taking up our place, and we want to grow, we want to develop, we want to gain that influence. We want the ones who do not have jobs to have jobs. We want the ones who are struggling with their families to no longer struggle. We want the ones who are coming right after us to find great youth models right within this youth circle. Now, what would take something like that? I
think it's what we said earlier, the realization of your potential. Like knowing that I'm more valuable than this. I have more potential than this, Like I don't need somebody who doesn't understand what I'm going through to speak for me, And I think that's why a lot of young people get agitated when positions meant for youth or young people are given to, senior maybe citizens, for example. Not that the senior citizens are not capable. It's just that if it's a position that's supposed to represent the youth or the young people, then ideally a qualified or capable, youth who fits that requirement should be given the opportunity, as opposed to someone who already had like experience. So I think it starts with young people to see yourselves in a different light, to see ourselves in a different light, and see that we are capable. We have what it takes. We can organize ourselves. even without maybe the money or the networks and the whatever, but you can say we want jobs, for example. We want employment. If in your plot or your whatever, you're several of you and none of you have jobs, you can come together, not wait for some politician to come and facilitate your movement, because I think that's what takes us down. Because someone is thinking, okay, the situation is bad, but I'm not going to go unless a politician is going to come and pay or facilitate me to go to point, B. You can decide for yourself and say, listen, we need a change. We need a change maybe in the healthcare system or in the education system or whichever other place or employment sector. And speak with one voice. I think also the issue is just that a lot of young people are not unified. There's a lot of competition, and it's normal. It's normal to have varied views and have competition amongst yourselves. But really, if you want to move forward, you need to get to a point of unification at some point to be able to speak, not so much about a political divide and stuff like that, but about issues that affect you. If it's the cost of living, it affects all of you, whether you are supporting the government or not. You see, if it's school fees and cost of education that is rising, it affects all of you, regardless of which side of the divide you're on. So, you can just say, as young people, we've had enough of this and we need something to be done. Not just policy, not just talk, but we want to see things being done. If it's appointments, if we're saying we want more young people appointed into certain positions, then, let's see that. But it takes speaking in one voice. It takes this entire group of people identifying who can be their front, who can speak for them, who can represent them, and then trusting them to take care of their interests. Because not all of you can be in that room, not all of you can be at the table, but you can have a representative who you trust, who you've picked to speak for you.
All right. Yeah. We've seen an increased number of appointments for young people. So at least the numbers aren't declining. They're not yet representative at all, but at least they're not declining. At some national bodies, at some county government levels, we've seen some young people appointed there. But young people is more than just being there.
Yes.
Because when you hear youth, you think freshness.
Yes.
You think a prophetic disruption of how things are done. And do you see that in terms of the young people who are getting into appointments? Do you see this prophetic disruption? Do you see this freshness, this newness? Do you see that?
I do see some. I do see some. And I see some who I think are deserving. They may not be, to the level of someone who's experienced, but you can see they have potential. You can see that, groomed or given a chance, they can make very, good leaders. And I think it starts from that, taking a chance with some people. But like I said, those are few. They are not the majority. They're like the minority still.
Would those be part of those voices you're talking about, the voices that speak for other young people? They already
I think maybe that's the disconnect. The people who get into these positions of influence are not necessarily the choice of the young people. They're not necessarily there to represent the young people. So they represent themselves and the people who appointed them, not necessarily now this multitude of young people. So I think that's where the disconnect is. Because now once this young person gets into this space, as long as they are not there, they don't owe their position or their allegiance to the youth, then they will not represent the interests of the youth. So it needs to change from just picking someone's daughter because, I don't know, maybe the fathers know each other, or someone's son, just because of their parents' network or something like that. That's just an example. To maybe turning it around and saying, if we're to choose young people, maybe every county or every constituency or whatever nominates one of their own to go. And if it's my peers who've nominated me, then you can't go there and mess up because you're speaking for them. So maybe something like that needs to change. I just don't know what structure that would follow, but it's important to have young people feel that the person in that office representing youth speaks for us, as opposed to Vivienne appointing somebody and saying, just because of their age, and saying, oh, this person is young, so they represent the youth. Yet the person has no connection at all to the young people in their area. Yeah.
Okay. I like what you've said, that there's need for voices that intentionally at national spaces, at spaces, at tables that matter.
Yes.
That they actually voice not themselves and they're the ones who appointed them, but they actually bring the mass of young people
Yes.
out there to these tables and to these spaces.
Yes.
And you've mentioned that what now lacks there is the structure.
Yes.
And then in this lack of this structure, there lies the opportunity then. There lies the opportunity for young people not to wait for this structure,
Yes.
but to actually create it.
Create
Just
structure.
create it, whether it is within the existing systems or outside of it,
Yeah.
And I think that's a place that young people need to engage. If the
And maybe,
structure
Rev,
does not exist,
the other thing that
then make it.
Yeah. The other thing that maybe young people need to take or have is courage. Sometimes you are afraid, but you don't realize that the same thing you're facing is what your neighbor is facing, is what, multitudes of others are facing. So if you came together, I mean, then you can go as one and say, hey, this is what we are facing and we want to see a difference. And you will be heard because now there's strength in numbers. So young people, take courage. Be courageous.
Okay.
You are young, you're energetic, you have amazing ideas. Be courageous.
And when you talk about being courageous,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about faith.
Yeah.
Young men and women of faith. And one of the fruits of faith is definitely courage.
Yes.
But do you see anything coming from the church frontiers as far as this? I can see you laughing, but I hope that's what's coming up is some good news, though. But do you see anything coming from the church
Rev,
front?
church. Hey, Sioni.
Wow.
I don't see anything. Not, at least not from the church.
Wow.
Not from the church.
I will ask you to look again because that's
I-
such a it's such a final view that I want to give another chance to look again, find maybe some redeeming thing.
As you're speaking, the picture that came to my mind was of David challenging Goliath. And I'm thinking, this was a youth, a young man, but he took courage and he was like, bring it on. Of course, led by faith. But even as he was taking those steps of faith, there were people who were putting him down, telling him, shouldn't you be herding our father's few sheep? Trying to put you in your place. Like, this is not your place. This is the big boys club. So please, wewe kaa uko chini. So you need, as a young person, you need to have this courage and boldness that's extraordinary. Because you will encounter those people who will say, but you're young. We ngoja miaka ingine tano, But we need to get past that.
No.
And now coming to the church, there's been this great debate of should the church be involved in the political. My personal view, not everyone will agree with this, but my personal view is that yes, they should. I think the church also can have a stand. It's not wrong. It's not wrong for the church to have a stand. And it's not wrong if it's not unified in its stand. I don't know if you understand what I mean. It's still okay. It's their democratic right to say we are picking this side or we are picking this side or whichever side you want to pick. You are allowed. But I think they should have these conversations. The way we teach about the gospel, the way we teach about Christ, can we get involved in teaching governance, in teaching leadership, in teaching politics? Because if we are really going to say we want to groom good leaders, the church must play its part in grooming, in mentoring, in teaching, not just about the gospel, but about also things like leadership. Yes, because it's through these teachings that you're going to raise up leaders who can get into these spaces and do, maybe participate in the change we want to see.
Yeah.
So right now, I'm a little disappointed. I don't see a lot of support coming from the Church of Kenya towards upcoming young people into the political space. I see them running more to the people who are already in power, to Salimu Amri.
That's really, it's a harsh judgment. But
it's just from my perspective.
Exactly, it comes from your experience, which is really sad.
Yes.
And I know that there are pastors and church leaders who are watching this program, and what's coming out is, there's a space there.
Yeah.
That unless we do something about it, then we are not going to be playing any role in terms of bringing up young people to the spaces of governance.
Yes.
And before we go for a short break, I want to, maybe I'm still trying to look for a redemptive. Let's say
please, I can help you with the redemptive.
Let's say there's potential. There's
a lot of potential.
Exactly.
There's a lot of potential.
See past the potential, see past it, and say, now, if the church began to equip young people on matters governance, this would be the kind of results. Mm-hmm.
I think so.
Yeah.
And also, I just want to say, in my journey, I've had support from some church leaders who I did not expect that they would, reach out and support and help. So I must say that it's not a blanket condemnation kind of thing. There are individuals who are trying to do their part, in a small way, in whichever way they're able to do this. I'm just saying, can we step it up?
All right.
Can we step it up?
And that's exactly what I would want you to kind of envision.
Yes.
And say, if we stepped it up, what would be like some possible things from where you sit?
Some possible things is, I think we'd have people whose hearts are really for the people, whose hearts are submitted to God. As in, at the end of the day, you know where your boundaries lie. So you know you're answerable to God. I think that's a greater call. It's not about being answerable to each man, but when you know that you're answerable and accountable to God, I think you're more able to be a better, what's this word? A better steward. Yeah. So if you're given people to lead, you can be a better steward of resources. You can be a better steward of people's hopes and aspirations, and cut out a lot of that greed, corruption, and those negative things that come with a lot of people in the political class. So those are some of the things I think we can expect to see when we have people who are God-led, people who are submitted, to God and accountable to God. Because that means I'm not waiting for you to whip me into shape and tell me, oh, you're doing this. It's because of the relationship I have with God that keeps me, in line, in check. Okay. As much as there are other alignments, in the political space, you're not just aligned to yourself. You're aligned to your political party. You're aligned to, the people who are getting you into that space. So there's a lot of balance that you have to, manage. But at the end of the day, you know which boundaries that you cannot cross. You know how far, ikifika hapa siwezi vuka, no matter what.
Okay.
And I think that's important. We must get leaders who have a genuine heart for managing our resources as Kenya well, distributing our resources equally, giving people opportunities, because people just want opportunities. Nobody wants to keep asking for money every day. They just want to be able to, earn a living and fend for their families.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I like the part of that once the church focuses on raising young people to take up the space of governance, then one of the products will be that we'll have a generation whose accountability is not to their stomachs,
Yes.
is beyond their appointing authorities,
Yes.
but is to God.
Yes.
Meaning that then we get a generation of young people who actually can die for what they believe in.
Yes.
It's a good place to take a break. We were talking about young people and especially about the way the current political air is handling them. And we're asking ourselves, Are the victors, are the victims? Some very sharp perspectives coming from this discussion with Vivienne Tar, and we would want to take a short break right now. Do engage us on this WhatsApp line, 0708-222-323. We take a short break. We'll be right back with this wonderful conversation. This is Spotlight. Stay with us.
Only God can turn a mess into a message.
I have a boy on a wheelchair.
Yeah.
I'm still preaching on the pulpit.
Amen.
Niliona mguu ya nyuma inakuja tu kunikanyaga, imenilenga tu kwa tumbo, nikaitana tu Jesus.
I got tired of working with the x-ray papers, and one day I just woke up and decided to burn them.
A test into a testimony.
The whole community didn't want to hear that anybody is born again. Excommunicated, straight.
Bila Yesu hakuna njia.
Join Sharon Naitore Wangenye on Testify.
Katika hiyo harakati hiyo spirit ikakemewa, mimi nimeona Yesu Kristo namna hii. Kwa msalaba. Opa. Hallelujah. Hallelujah.
Every Thursday at 8 p.m. for a moment to grow your faith some more.
Hope TV is now available on GoTV Channel 103, Zuku Channel 873, Signet Channel 817, and Star Times Channel 026. Enjoy our uplifting content and family-friendly programming anytime. Hope TV, you look and live. Hope TV is now available on GoTV Channel 103, Zuku Channel 873, Signet Channel 817, and Star Times Channel 026. Enjoy our uplifting content and family-friendly programming anytime. Hope TV, you look and live.
Viewer, welcome back. This is Spotlight, and we are asking ourselves the question, are the young people victors or victims in this political era? And we are very grateful for your participation. We'll be engaging your issues that you've raised in a short while. Again, we are happy to have with us Vivienne Tar, who is a governance analyst and also a commentator in terms of politics in Kenya, and also a great youth leader. And we are happy to have these perspectives here. I mean, it's quite the discussion here about young people and their involvement. Again, culture, the culture that we're living in today still thinks of young people as a little, not a little, laid back. It paints young people as more entertainment oriented.
Yes.
It paints young people as, if it's hard work, I'm not doing it, I want things that come quickly, right? So it's the culture that we are in does not paint young people in a very kind of strong leadership, frontline kind of spirit. You've mentioned Tom Mboya, you mentioned people like Martin Luther King Jr. and other names that young people, but on the front line, and
I think
legitimately,
Malcolm X.
Malcolm X too, legitimately so, like out there. So can you comment about this culture? Is it real or is it a perception?
I think the culture is real, but that I will throw it back to the young people. We need to learn. My challenge to the young people is tell your own story. If you don't tell your story and you leave it to somebody else to tell it, it will always be distorted. It will never come out, in the real sense of what's happening and what you're experiencing. The experience is yours. The challenges, it's you who's facing them. So we need to learn. That's why communication is such an important skill, because it allows you to articulate yourself, correctly in the right manner, so that you're perceived correctly. And communication is not just about speech, it's also about how you dress, how you carry yourself, who you're relating with, how you're handling your things. So it's just, young people need to really understand that we need to learn to tell our stories. Take it up and do it, to the best of your ability. Because if you don't do it and it's left to someone else, they will always use it to their own advantage. But largely in the political space, young people are actually just pawns and victims a lot of the times. Very few actually get to elevated positions. As much as there are cases that some do, it's the minority. It's the minority. The majority are just used, they're the security, they're the bloggers, they're the, they're like low-key, minor roles that are not really that well rewarded. Yes.
But sometimes also the larger culture wants to make young people contented with what you call the low-key.
Yes.
Oh, kazi mitani. We've given you jobs, right? Be happy. You are, handling the communication side. You are, doing all these, social media stuff. We've given you jobs. Just be happy, right?
Just be happy.
Just be happy. We're doing a lot for you.
You say that, and I remember there's this video I watched of a South African revolutionist. They want like a revolution of young people. I just can't remember his name, but he was talking about the state, how it is in South Africa, and which I can relate to even in Kenya. He says the education system, it's like you're taught to label insects and do weird things, but children in Europe and Asia are taught how to come and manage the resources we have here. So you're not matched when you meet on the global platform. Your thinking, your perspective, your entire education and knowledge is skewed towards, servitude. Their knowledge, skills, and everything, empowerment, is skewed towards management, leadership, They are taught mining and, tech and things like that. You are taught menial agriculture. So it's like the system expects you to just be a subsistence farmer. Whereas the system, say in Europe, expects them to do high-tech farming, agri-tech that really brings in the money. So we need to relook.
Which is a bit ironical because young people are so exposed these days because there's information everywhere.
Yeah.
You can access European ways of thinking. You can access North American ways of life, You can access Asian perspectives. But then we still are not able as young people here to really come up with a structure of our own. That puts us where we belong. Where do we belong anyway?
But maybe it's also because...
where do we belong? Where do young people belong?
We belong here.
Okay.
We belong on the table.
The back line? Is it the front line? Is it... Where do young people belong?
On the table. On the discussion table. Like where we're discussing Kenya's 9 trillion budget, we should have a say of how exactly that budget is being used. If you're the larger population and, you are the most sane number. How can someone else decide for you? It's like in your household, like you are the father. You are the main person. How does someone else come and decide for you? This is how you're going to do these things. So I think the issue, when I think about it, I think the issue is that we don't see ourselves as able, or there's a fear or a lack of courage that holds us back. So you feel like we should do something, but you don't want to be the one who starts because you don't know what the consequence will be. So you're like, hey, wacha tungoje tuone.
And you see that
how things will be.
That very attitude of withdrawal. You can see the challenge. It's, for instance, no one will stand up for you if you don't, but you still shrink back. The scripture actually puts it very plainly that we are not of they that shrink back. True. Yeah. And if we were to borrow that line and put it in the context of young people in these times, then I think they should have like T-shirts saying, we are not the shrinkers, you know. we aren't the ones who shrink back.
Yeah.
Because I think that's part of the mind that defeats young people. That they know they can articulate issues and all that, but they still want to sit back. And as they sit back, I mean, things are still happening.
Things are still happening.
Still happening.
Or maybe you focus on your inadequacies so that you don't push your strengths to the fore. So every time you want to do something or you think we should do something, it's like your weaknesses or your inadequacies are the ones that, you know, come to the fore. And you're like, they won't even take me seriously. You see? So I think courage is important.
So how do we exercise that? How do we, I mean, let me use spiritual language. How do we cast out that demon?
I think it will only just take one person, like the Arab Spring. It just takes one event, one person, one thing to trigger and get people.
Yeah, but that one thing, we don't know where that one thing is going to be. But between now and then, and I think you raised a very important opportunity, how do we begin to structure, you know, the front lining, the bringing to the table of young people, not the ones who are just appointed, but the masses, you know, at the table.
Now, I just have thought about this. I've thought about how it's a process. You know, it doesn't happen overnight. Like, you don't wake up and you're like, I can do this. It's a process of building courage, building your articulation, building yourself to building your confidence to a place where you feel, okay, now I'm capable, such that no matter what comes to put you down and tell you, no, you can't do this, you have built yourself. You've been built, not you've built yourself. It's a process that encompasses many people, that has brought you to a place where now you feel I am able, I am confident, I can do this, such that nothing will make you hold back. So that's where that church process we're talking about of grooming and training comes in. Because when you start talking to these young people, say when they are young, you know, say from teenage, for example, you know, into early 20s, for example, by the time they get to that early 20s, you know, you've built their confidence, you've built their exposure, you've built their courage. They are able to stand up and say, no, this is wrong. Just back to stories, I was reading through the Rwanda genocide, and there's this school that was attacked. It was among the first schools that the rebels attacked. And they were ordered, I think it was a high school, they were ordered to separate, you know, Hutus this side, Tutsis this side, and the students refused. They said no. And the rebels told them, we are going to kill you if you do not, you know, separate on tribal lines. And they said, you know, if you kill us, but we're not going to do that. And 6 of them ended up getting butchered. But the rest still did not, you know, do what the rebels wanted them to do. But it needs... It means there's something these young people have gone through to the point where there's conviction, such that it doesn't matter what you face, you have a strong conviction that now what I believe is the right thing. So, and that takes now that, you know, that process of training, building, mentoring, hand-holding, because it doesn't come naturally for everyone. And it's not something that, you know, a young person will just wake up and say, okay, I can do this, and go.
Yeah, you know, Vivienne, when it comes to this jobs thing, it's been promised over and over again by several governments now that will create this number of jobs. And this number of jobs is all the time for young people. Like jobs, young people don't have jobs, we'll create jobs for them. Now, if you observe carefully, you realize that the employment model has collapsed.
Yeah.
I mean, Safaricom can only take in so many people.
So many people.
You know, I mean, even the government can only take in so many people. And talk about all these, you know, corporations, manufacturings, and all that, can only take so many people. So there is a certain level to which that employment model, we can trust it to absorb all these young people, graduating every year from all kinds of institutions. Now, young people, again, and this is a viewer who is asking this question, how can they be a solution to this challenge of lack of jobs?
Unemployment.
How can they be their own solution, given that they're living in their generation, which is understood only by them, meaning that they can create their own future? So how can they be a solution to their own problem instead of just craning towards a collapsed model?
Okay, so the first thing I want to say is government's role in this thing is not even to create jobs. Government's role is to create an enabling environment for the economy to thrive so that businesses, corporations, the tax regime is favorable for the citizens to thrive. So I think first government should shift and realize that their main role is to provide infrastructure and just an enabling environment for economic opportunities. Then the rest will take care of themselves. But now the young people also have a role to play. That means right now what matters is skill. It's not the paper you have. It's skill. What value can you add? What can you do to bring value to your community, to your workplace? Because the skill you have is what will give you the job. Okay, ideally, that's the way it's supposed to be. In Kenya, it's a bit different. In Kenya, you can be a celebrity somewhere and you're given opportunities. So, but ideally, it's supposed to be what skill. Can you do coding? Because if you can code, then you can do a job that's even remote. You see, it doesn't have to be for a corporation in Kenya. That's what the internet has done. It's enabled, it's expanded opportunities. So I think young people also need to take up the responsibility of ensuring they have the right skill sets that are required for this, generation of work. So if it's graphic design, if it's coding, whatever it is, the skill that you need that can bring value to your employer and make sure you're earning money. So right now, it's not so much about I have a degree or I have a master's. You may have that master's, you may have that degree, but what is your skill? If I need you to do for me a balance sheet or a books of accounts, and you're saying you're a finance graduate and you can't do it, then I will go for the CPA guy who can do it. So it's about skill. Upskill yourself continuously because the world is changing. So that means you have to keep developing, self-development, self-improvement, continuous improvement. You have to keep learning, keep an open mind. You may have gotten that degree, first class, whatever, but if you don't have the skill that employers are looking for, it will be a long day in the sun.
Okay. I like the fact that young people can do a lot about bringing their own solution.
Yeah.
Let me bring your thinking to, again, the place that caused you laughter, like Sarah, the church. Because as we think about one of the spaces that really need to reform so that young people can find relevance in it, the church needs to reform because young people are trooping out because for some reason the church is not maybe answering their questions, right? And you being a lady of faith, how do you see young people also can play a role in bringing the church to where it's supposed to be at such a time as this?
I think in challenging them, in asking questions. Of course, the church needs to be open to hearing, maybe even different views, but I think it comes from conversations. The Bible says iron sharpens iron, so the church leadership or the people who are in leadership spaces within the church need to be open to hearing or listening also to the views, ideas, questions of young people. There needs to be this safe space where young people can also bring their ideas, bring their challenges, bring, their solutions and not be dismissed. So that you can kind of brainstorm and see, okay, this we can do, this we can't, this is outrageous, this is not, this is practical, this is not. But there needs to be like that openness for conversations to happen so that there's no disconnect. Like one group is on itself, making its own decisions, and the other group is by themselves, okay, you know, dissenting and all that. There needs to be like this possibility or space where conversations can happen. But it still ends up at that place of, even within the church leadership structures, there need to be spaces or inclusion of young people so that people who represent like the younger generation that is not of the leadership are also included. Otherwise, what will happen is you structure your sermons and your teachings and whatever else according to the senior, you know, congregation, and totally leave out the younger congregation. And they'll feel like, okay, there's nothing here for us, and go. But if you have like a few people, you know, within just the leadership structure saying, okay, you know, for my generation, this TikTok is what will work. Then you're like, you're so certainly nini, you know. But at least there's that place where you can talk, learn, exchange ideas. This young person can go back and say, even ndo nimeambiwa. So there's opportunity for exchange of ideas.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And just finally, somebody has put out this theory that young people are seen as a threat in the conversations after the conversation. Young people as labeled as threats. It comes out in the open now and again because you hear the older or much older politicians saying, once a young person does not sing their song and seems to express some independence, they say, that's a young man. I'll talk with him, you know?
Yeah.
That's a young man. I will put him in line. But it's because they have expressed some independence, and that independence is threatening. So, can you speak to that?
I mean, there is some truth to a young person being a potential threat to a more established politician who may be advanced, maybe in terms of age. And I would understand why. You know, the senior politicians were once young also. They were once firebrands. So they can see, they can see potential. They can see the possibility of what you can do, even if you can't see it yet. But they can see it because they've been there. They know the challenges and all that. And so they know if we don't, you know, engage this person or manage them, they can be a potential problem. And like they say, politics is about interests. A lot of the times it's about personal interests. So they will see, if we let Vivienne in this space and anaendelea hivi, hapa mbele, atatusumbua. So they find a way to manage you. And you know, managing you can be many ways. They can give you a position there to keep you busy or whatever else. But then I think as a young person, you need to know your value. Know your value. Know your value. Know what you're willing to compromise, because sometimes you do have to compromise. But you must know up to what extent that you can. So that if it exceeds that, you're like, no, hapa sipiti, you know. But if you know your value and know what you stand for, I think as a young person, you'll stand firm.
Okay.
You will not falter. But yes, I'm encouraging as many young people as possible, especially Christians.
To be a threat?
Yes, to be a threat. To get into the political space, to get engaged, to be aware, get into political conversations. I know it's not what is always said in Christian circles, but it's important. This thing of apathy, of we won't vote, I'm just trying to think if the church just mobilized its entire, you know, congregants and said, support this person, how amazing that would be. Okay. So let's just get, at least at the basic level, engaged and aware about what's happening. Okay. Because staying aloof and apathetic is not helpful. It's not part of the solution. Yeah.
Finally, young men are complaining that young women are taking all the jobs. So there is unrest, not just outside, not just the young people and the older people, but within the youth bracket, there's unrest. And young men are feeling really that young women are taking all the good jobs. There's a certain favor, there's a certain leaning that if you go, if there's an opportunity, and you and a young lady have both qualified, chances are that the young lady will take it. How can you address that?
I think
briefly?
In the political space, I think it's because, as it is right now, even without going young, old, whatever, it's still very male-dominated, very, very male-dominated. So you find that every time maybe there's an opportunity, and there's been a serious push for like gender balance in the political leadership space. So I think that's what's happening. So every time there's a slot for, say, nomination, it's most likely going to be a woman and not a man, simply because we're looking at it now from a gender perspective, not so much age. And when we look at the totality, say, of 390 MPs, you'll find 70, 80% are already male. So if you're a young man competing with a young woman, it's likely that, the younger woman will get the chance, simply because, the gender factor kind of favors her. But it's not in every space or every industry. There's still a lot more that needs to be done. I was looking at a picture that was taken, I think, at the CS for ICT last week. Like 30, 40, a meeting of 30, 40, they were all men. All men. And not old, young. So it's still, I know it feels like there are more women coming into the space, and there are more, but they are still not enough. We are still the minority.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. Vivienne, thank you so much for coming to Spotlight. Very enlightening perspectives, and I'm sure that lots of the leaders, especially church leaders, who are watching this program have been awakened in terms of realizing, especially their role in raising young people who can save the day. Thank you so much, and blessings to you as you continue in your leadership and in your spaces.
Yes.
God bless you abundantly. Viewer, we've been talking to Vivienne Tarr, who is a governance and political analyst, and lots of views concerning young people and how they are taking this space in the present times. And one thing that's coming out very, very clearly is that young people are capable of young things. This has been Spotlight. Thank you for watching.